Hey everyone, this is Callie, and today we are going in depth on the price points Apple has for iPhones this year. This is the fourth and final video in the series. If you watched my video on the basics, you already know Apple has 20 price offerings that span 7 devices. If you have not watched my Apple Prices Basics video, I recommend you watch that video first. You can click here to see it. In this video, I will go beyond that information and expound on the basic scenarios as to who will most benefit from the different levels. In this video, we'll go over Apple's pricing overlap between models and price constraints to consider when looking at each model. In this video, we are looking at price, storage, RAM, screen, and the camera. Quick word on screen and camera. If you have any opinion at all, you either believe that Apple is after professionals and enthusiasts, and Dolby HDR is great and important, and they should have a 120 Hz refresh rate on the Pro models, especially on the largest iPhone screen they have ever made, iPhone 12 Max. Or you believe the lack of 120 Hz display is not even worth mentioning because most people wouldn't even notice. And the Dolby HDR is not a big deal because most people will not be able to notice the difference and don't even have a TV or monitor that will play the standard anyway. If you fall in the middle, then you are passionate and I appreciate you, but you are wrong. And your passion has blinded you to the facts. So, here's the table we're going to be going over. Hopefully you recognize it from my previous video. And do not fret, this is not as confusing as it may first appear. Most of the items repeat across columns, so it's not even unique information in each cell. Here we go. An issue to consider is longevity. The primary pieces of information you need to know regarding the life of your phone, assuming you don't destroy it, are the chip it uses and the amount of RAM it has. Apple touts the former and hides the latter. Simple logic will dictate that the newer the chip, the longer it will last. However, the A14 has not demonstrated itself to be leaps and bounds beyond the A13. What will make the difference is the information that Apple hides. Apple designs and makes their devices work great when they are released. What is important for our analysis is how they last over time. RAM has demonstrated itself to be a stumbling block when trying to hold on to a phone. Apple has some of the best RAM management, but I find that the lower amounts of RAM that Apple tends to equip in its phones are detrimental to the long-term user experience. So for my iPhone X, my use case made it apparent 1 year after my iPhone's release. The iPhone X was released with 3 GB of RAM, but 1 year later, the iPhone XS Max was released with 4 GB of RAM. For me, as a player of Pokemon Go, I often found myself wanting to switch between playing the game and taking pictures. The iPhone X will not let me take a picture without closing the app and having to relaunch it. But the iPhone XS Max will let us play a game, open the camera, zoom in, take a picture, and then resume the game without having to reload. While I admit the use case is fairly unique, the lesson is universalizable. RAM matters to the long run. RAM matters to the long-term enjoyability of the device. Apps grow in size and demanded clock speed, but the requirement that grows first is RAM. If the longevity of the device matters greatly to you, the iPhone 12 Pro and the iPhone 12 Pro Max are expected to have 6 GB of RAM, which will provide you with the greatest possible longevity for the current iPhone models. How many pictures and videos you take, along with the numbers and types of apps you download, will hold a major influence on the amount of storage you will be comfortable with. For the average person, I recommend at least 128 GB for people who will keep their phones for 3 years or more. For the regular iPhone 12 and below, Apple is now offering the jump from 64 GB to 128 GB for $50. I recommend taking this option for just about everyone. When it was a $100 jump, it was more of a price consideration, but for $50, it should be the default. Night mode is an amazing feature that allows the user to take pictures in very low light. Google first announced this feature, but Apple's version was not far behind. This is available on the iPhone 11 and above, which makes the entry price for this feature $600. If the camera is important to you, this is a need to have. But if you pair it with the $50 upgrade, the entry point is $650. And if you care about photography, 128 GB is your starting point. Portrait mode in night mode is only available on the Pro iPhone 12 models. Since this is a new feature, we will have to wait until the reviews are out to be able to identify how distinctive and beneficial the average person will find this feature. If you want a telephoto lens, the iPhone 12 Pro models are also the only way to go. If having a telephoto lens is a key component of what you're looking for, you may be better served by a used iPhone 11 Pro or iPhone XS. Once the early adopters are able to get their hands on these, expect the price to drop a bit. Aperture is really about how much light the lens can allow onto the sensor. If you do a bunch of low-light photography, the wider aperture, measured by the smallest f-stop number, is what you're looking for. In this respect, the iPhone 12 models have a distinct advantage, as the f1.6 is quite a bit better than the f1.8 of iPhone 11 and earlier. One thing to remember is that the iPhone has a 12 megapixel camera on a teeny tiny sensor. As much as they are able to do, if photography is what you are most interested in, a dedicated camera will usually do much better for you. The Sony ZV-1 is a great point-and-shoot camera if you're not looking to move up to a DSLR. Just remember that the nighttime photography will require a tripod, but the shots you get will be more flexible than what you're able to get from an iPhone, though Apple's RAW photo format has yet to be tested. This particular format is only available on Pro models because of software limitations, and Apple wants to be able to differentiate the standard iPhone 12 from the iPhone 12 Pro. The iPhone 12 mini and the regular iPhone 12 offer Dolby 4K HDR at 30 frames a second, while the Pro models bump it up to an available 60 frames per second. All of the iPhone models in Apple's current lineup, from the iPhone SE to the iPhone 12 Pro Max, allow for 4K recording at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. The 24 frames per second is what Hollywood movies use, gives you that cinematic look. 30 frames per second is pretty standard for things like YouTube. 60 frames per second is nice for smoothness and the ability for a little flexibility when you decide to slow down the video in post-production. But it's not near the 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second that you would want to use for real slow motion, which is available on the iPhone. LCD or LED? Apple has been commended for their screen technology for many years, and the more important factor is going to be screen size. Apple's LCD screens are on point, and while maybe not quite to the point of LED, their LCD screens are not to be looked down upon. The more important factor is going to be screen size. The iPhone SE does not have the smallest body, but it has the smallest screen. This can actually be an advantage. If you want one-handed use from your phone, this will provide you the best opportunity. The iPhone 12 mini has a 5.4-inch screen, and the iPhone 12 Max has a 6.7-inch screen. All of the remaining iPhones have a 6.1-inch screen, including the iPhone XR, the iPhone 11, the iPhone 12, and the iPhone 12 Pro. Anything on this list before the iPhone 12 Pro would have an LCD screen, while the entirety of the iPhone 12 lineup have LED screens. As we discussed, you probably won't notice. The iPhone SE is the last phone that Apple sells that still has Touch ID. In the times of face masks, this can be a much more convenient option most of the time. All of the other phones have Face ID, and the version of Face ID should be about the same on all of the models across the board. The final thing to discuss is the battery life. As we saw with the iPhone 6 issues, battery life will play a major role in the functionality of your phone towards the end of its life cycle. In my opinion, you will likely fall into one of two camps. The first camp will abandon their phone for an upgrade by the time the battery degrades enough to make it an inconvenience. The second camp will, after 3 or more years, spend the extra money to have Apple replace the battery. It is not a cheap process, but it's much cheaper than getting a new phone, and it will breathe new life into your device for an extra few years. My iPhone X is at 80% battery capacity, but it gets me through the day at peak performance, so I'll wait before spending the $70 to replace the battery. So, that was it. That was my deep dive into the iPhone lineup for the end of 2020. Let me know if you have any questions that I didn't address. Okay, are you going to upgrade or skip this generation? Or are you just buying into what you can afford? What features did Apple provide that convinced you to go with that specific tier? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.